So now we're going to go into the speech types. These speech types are all offshoots, in a sense, of these general ideas of what platforms are. So starting off, the first of all, that makes sense. The first one that I wanted to cover is original oratory. There's also persuasive and expository. We'll get to those in a second. Starting off, an original oratory is a prepared speech written by the competitor on a topic of the speaker's choice. Now this is directly from, oh hey guys, this is directly from the STOA website itself. I think most of these points on the slide are actually. But an original oratory is a prepared speech, just like we talked about. It's written by the speaker or written by the competitor on a topic of the speaker's choice. Now that doesn't really tell you what an original oratory is, but what it does tell you is that it covers just about every conceivable topic on the face of the planet. And if you listen to a lot of original oratories, you have probably heard just about every conceivable topic on the face of the planet, and there's still a lot more. You always are surprised with the things that people come up with for OOs. I'll just put that out there. Anyway, the purpose of this speech may be to inform, persuade, entertain, inspire, the speaking thing is really hard. Inspire, eulogize, or fulfill any other function. So if you want to give a funeral, give an OO. Basically, that's what this is saying. No, I'm just kidding. For clarity, eulogizing something in terms of rhetoric is reflecting on it. It's saying, this happened, this is what we can learn from this. This happened, this is what we can take from this. It's not saying that, Judge, you're about to die, so I'm going to give you a eulogy. That would be a great sci-fi novel, though. Okay. Anyway, I underline the word inform for this main reason. I think the main thing that distinguishes original oratories from other forms of platform speeches is that their primary purpose, their prime directive, is to inform an audience. Their primary purpose is to take something that the audience might not fully understand and explain it. Say, this is what this means. This is a depth to this issue that you might not have considered before. What that means is you should not give original oratories with analysis that people already agree with. A, because that's just not compelling, but B, because you're not informing people on anything. You're not exposing anything, you're not showing people anything. One of my favorite original oratories, unfortunately came very early in my career, so I didn't have some of the polish to go along with it, but it was one of my favorite topics. It was about the sacrifice of the Russian people during World War II. How the Russian people, different from the Russian government, were absolutely decimated by both external invaders and their own government. It was one of my favorite topics because it was something that people hardly even considered, and I got to inform them on something that they had no idea about. Again, it was really early in my career, so it was a terrible speech. But I loved the topic. The topic was, I think, one of my favorite OO topics. Obviously it was mine, so I'm a bit narcissistic in saying that, but you know. Okay, the goal is to develop a polished, winsome speaker who can present an engaging and organized speech on any topic. So in other words, you want to be able to give a well-organized speech informing something on just about any topic. You don't have to give it on every topic, obviously, because there's not humanly time for that. But your goal is to develop a very polished and a very winsome speaker. I will say this about platforms. If you are a person who is like me that's sitting there a couple years ago saying platforms are stupid, I just want to do limited preps, platforms give you the ability to add polish to your speeches, to focus on the details, to have an attention to details that grows you in your limited preps more than you even realize, more than you even see. So if you're like me, you hate platforms because you think they're pointless, or you're going to do a platform but you're not really going to pour a bunch of work into it, understand that it's really instrumental in helping the other areas of your speaking, and even helping debate as well. They give the Founders Award at NITalk, and even though I disagree with the award a little bit, because anyway, I won't go on that soapbox, but the reason they give that is because the most well-rounded speakers are the ones who participate in different types of events. Platforms are the very same thing. The way you become a well-rounded speaker is by investing into platforms. First of all, investing into numerous different types of events, but investing in a platform so you understand the polish, you understand the attention to detail, and you can start to be more effective in your other speeches as well. Okay, so the second type that I wanted to cover is persuasive. Persuasive, I'm going to just say this, persuasive is my least favorite of the three platforms. It's really not even that close. I think persuasive can tend to be a little bit dry sometimes, a little bit on the dry side. It's usually not as compelling as maybe original oratories, or sometimes exposes are. But I'll tell you what it is. Some of you guys might like it. I did a persuasive this year, so I'm not really one to talk. But yeah, okay. A persuasive speech is a prepared speech written by the competitor which advocates a specific position or course of action. Now, looking back at original oratory, what it says, it informs something. Obviously, you're still trying to persuade your audience of something, right? Persuading somebody isn't specific to the event persuasive. It's not that persuasive is the only event where you persuade somebody to do something. The difference is in original oratory, you address how somebody thinks. You attempt to change how somebody thinks, while in persuasive, you attempt to change what somebody does. The specific courses of action that they might take. The purpose of the speech is to advocate a particular position or course of action with the goal of influencing the audience's opinion. So in other words, what you want to do when you give a persuasive is you want to advocate a very specific and a very particular position. An example of our persuasive that I gave was that trying to persuade people that they should read philosophy. So I was first saying, yes, you should change your mindset, philosophy is important, yada, 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 yada. But I was also saying you should adopt a specific course of action. You should change the way that you act. You should change the way that you function because of this information. So when you're dealing with a persuasive, you are not just dealing with informing a topic, you are also dealing with advocating a specific course of action. The more specific, the better it's going to be. Finally, persuasives are usually the most straightforward type of platform. Straightforward can oftentimes be synonymous with boring. I'm not saying that persuasives are boring. What I am saying is you have a very straightforward approach. It's going to have to be the most logical appeal of any of the three types of platforms. Sure, you can have some emotion thrown in there, absolutely, definitely. But what I am saying is that it's going to be the most logical, the most rational, the most reasonably supported by evidence type of platform that you are going to have. Which is strange because I should have really loved it, but I didn't. But anyway, persuasives are very straightforward, they're very simple, they're very cut and dry, black and white for the most part. And so if you want to do a persuasive, it's probably the simplest one that you can start with. It's probably the easiest type of platform, and the reason behind that is it will help you develop an explicit case that you will be able to be more implicit with in your other speeches. But I can get to that in a few. Okay. Thirdly, expository. If you would have asked me 7 months ago what my least favorite platform was, I would have said Expos. If you ask me now what my favorite platform is, I would say Expos. You see, we all have this conception that Expos is just about like guinea pigs and stuff. You can actually talk about really cool stuff and it's really fun. I loved actually like dealing with props and stuff. But anyway, okay. An expository speech is a prepared speech written by the competitor which explains or exposes a topic, usually with the help of visual aids. When it says usually with the help of visual aids, that's a quote from the Stowe website. What it means is always with the help of visual aids. If you walk into an expos room without visual aids, you lose, like automatically. So discount this word and pretend that says always. Okay. In essence, what an expos does is it can accomplish the same purpose as an OO or a persuasive. The difference is that it does it with visual aids. It does it with things that you can see, things that your mind can comprehend because you're actually using it as an example. The goal is to develop a winsome, polished speaker who can present a creative, well-organized speech while efficiently employing audiovisual aids or props. In other words, it's like the same message as OO and persuasive, they just added visual aids or props onto the end of it. So it's very similar to those two. You just have to effectively use your props. Now, I'm just going to put this out briefly. We'll talk about how to develop your XPOS prompts a little bit more later in the week if you're considering doing an XPOS. But what it means when it says you employ audio-visual aids is not that you just have something sitting there that people can look at, but that your audio or visual aids actually help somebody understand the issue at hand. You're not just doing an XPOS because you believe that you can talk but also put words up on your board, or you can talk but you can also put cool pictures up on your board for people to look at. What it also means is that you have to use some things as examples or maybe even object lessons to help people understand something. That's the reason why this goal says to expose something. It exposes something that people might not necessarily think about much, that people might not necessarily consider much, and it does so effectively by showing it to them. You have to show people something in order to expose it. You have to show people what's behind the curtain. Show people the things that they do not consider. The best way to do that is by not using your audio or visual aids as just things that are there, but using it as a very intentional tool to back up what you're saying, to help what you're saying be more compelling and more convincing. Expository can be one of the most powerful platforms, and the reason why is because you are combining both audio and visual, I'm trying to say words. You're combining in a judge's opinion both the audio and the visual impact of something. So it's not just that you're talking to them, it's not just that you are using pretty rhetoric or even kind of pretty rhetoric. You're also helping them to stimulate their brain by seeing things. For a lot of people, they function better when they see things. They understand things better when they see them. Expos can really help. It also just adds another dimension on, which can make it really, really powerful, which is why I get a little sad sometimes that expos is often one of those categories where people just don't have serious topics. They think about something that's kind of silly that they can have, visual aids on, and they say, hey, look, this could be a great expos. Now, I'm not saying that every topic has to be super serious. Some topics are great, and they're not that serious, but they're something that matters to somebody, and they have a true heart behind what they're trying to say. Like, Grace, I know yours last year. I mean, it wasn't the most serious of topics. But I really, really enjoyed it because she had a heart behind it. She had a passion behind it that she was trying to convince somebody of something. If you give a speech on guinea pigs, no one loves guinea pigs that much, okay? Okay, not to criticize whoever did that speech. Obviously, there's a place that you have to start, and a lot of times younger kids do exposes because they seem kind of like a little bit of a glorified arts and craft project sometimes. But, okay, I'm getting really judgmental and critical right now. I'm just going to stop, and I'm going to say very succinctly, if you do an expose, aim high. Choose a very serious topic, choose something that people do not understand without the assistance of visual aids, and try to tackle it. Don't bite off more than you can chew, obviously. I almost bit off more than I can chew, and I did an expose on a topic that I had spent years researching. So you can go too far. That's definitely a possibility. But what I would definitely recommend, especially with expose, is making sure that you choose a powerful topic that can actually have some use and some productivity when considered. Now, there's a time and a place for things that we wouldn't necessarily consider to be serious, as long as they still have some kind of lasting impact. Okay, here are the common threads between these three, the common things that trace between all three of these speech types. The first is that all three platforms are prepared. This means that they should be extremely polished. If you show up in a platform room, it doesn't matter how good you are at limited preps, if you are not polished with your platform, judges will be able to tell. I'm one of those people that was never super polished with his platform until I decided to actually pour work into my expos. With a lot of my platforms, I wasn't as polished, and that was always kind of my stumbling block. That was always what hindered me. I didn't pour enough effort into my platforms when they didn't do as well, so they weren't polished. They weren't at that level of just being smoothed off at the ends. Everyone is going to have a lot of time to pour into these, and there are a lot of people who pour hours and hours and hours into polishing their platforms. When you have a prepared speech like this, you are going to have to understand that it's going to have to be polished. And this is just where I'm going to have a brief disclaimer. Polishing is not fun. Doing platforms well is not fun. Being able to compete at a high level in these events is not fun. And it shouldn't be. Your goal should be to have some fun, but your overall goal should not be to have that this is going to be a really fun process and that it's going to be a ride, it's going to be a journey without any bumps or bruises or staying up on the verge of tears because you just cannot figure out how to do this thing. What I am saying is that platforms can be very, very miserable. How many of you guys play sports? How many of you guys watch sports? How many of you guys have heard about sports? There we go. Do we all have in our minds maybe this is just me. Do we all have in our minds a picture of somebody, an athlete training? Of an athlete training for a goal, trying to achieve a goal. You see, when I have that picture in my mind, what I always consider is those like manly platitudes that I've heard my whole life, like sweat is like weakness leaving the body or whatever. He's like suffering, he's got blood dripping down his body because he's training so hard and stuff like that. Like, for some reason I find that attractive and I try to emulate that, I don't know. But anyway, what I'm trying to say is we all have that picture in our minds of what it takes to reach success. And a lot of that picture is guaranteed by reality. We see it in reality. There are athletes that train really, really hard to be the best in their sports. Not just for a few years, not just for a few months, but for their whole lives. The same thing is true here. You're going to have to put the sweat and the tears, so to speak. Probably no sweat, because you're probably doing it wrong if that's true. But maybe a few tears. You probably also shouldn't draw blood when you're riding the platform. But the point still remains. It is going to be hard work. It is going to be difficult. It is not going to be a good time. Don't expect it to be. If you expect it to be a good time, it is going to be one of the most miserable experiences of your life. You're probably not going to pour into it as much because you'll get discouraged. You won't actually do well, then all of that suffering would be in vain. Okay, now let's move on to more fun stuff like time limits. The time limit for all three of these events is 10 minutes. So you have 10 minutes to give a speech. They're getting more strict and more strict as we go along about how close you have to be to the time limit. Earlier in the year, there's going to be more forgiveness. Funny story about that, but you already know it. Don't give a 15-and-a-half-minute speech, guys. Just don't do it. Okay, the time limit's 10 minutes, and it's going to start to get stricter and stricter, I think, as you go further through your careers. So understand how important it is to drill your speech over and over and over again so it can be as close to 10 minutes as possible. When I got to Night Talk in my XBOS, almost every single round was within 3 seconds of 10 minutes. There was one round that went 10-10, I think, but everything else was within 3 seconds of 10 minutes. That's the point that you should aim for when dealing with a time limit. You want to take it out of the judge's hands to be able to say, oh, well, this is a tiebreak, they went 10-30, they went 10-15, so I'm going to go with the person who went 10-15. So really drill and really focus on the time limit. Don't just say, oh, well, I have to do this generally. If you're under the time limit, that's fine. That's actually better. If you can communicate the same message in 9 minutes that somebody does in 10 minutes, then you're going to be a lot more effective in the minds of some judges. Now, I'm not saying you should only write 9-minute platforms. You should still try to go for 10 minutes, but it's not a horrible thing if you're a little bit under. You have to be very careful about going too far over them. Okay. All three of these types of speeches rely on evidence, quotes, and statistics. It doesn't just have to be your opinion. I know a couple people who are scared of platforms because they feel like they basically just have to sit down and write an opinion essay on something. They just have to sit down and write down their opinions and they don't really know what's going on. That's far from the case. You can have evidence, you can have quotes, you can have statistics, you can have any outside information in your speech that you want to. I think it's 30% of your words that you can quote, which is a lot. 30% of the words in your speech cannot be your own. Like, that's crazy to me. I only ever used like 6 or 7%. I didn't rely on quotes too much, but you can definitely use them. You should definitely have them to support your position. Regardless of that, though, you should have warrants. Even if you do not quote people, you should have warrants for your claims. Those can be completely logical. Why this makes logical sense. But you do want to have warrants that can take the form of evidence, quotes, and statistics, and you can rely on these a lot if you need to.